Cool.
Hello and welcome to another spotlight. Hello to you, Ben.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Oh, it's my absolute pleasure to have you today. Ben Hughes, a wonderful friend of mine who has donated his time a few times to assist me in educating students in the area of mental health. I asked Ben to come along today and have a chat. Uh, and I won't introduce him because I feel that I wouldn't do him justice. You know, he's got so much to give in the area of mental health and just as a person, because he's a wonderful human being as well. Ben Hughes, welcome today.
Thank
Um,
you.
First of all, I'd just like to start. Give us a little bit of a story, a bit of a Ben Hughes story to start with.
All right. Well, I guess there's the Ben Hughes story, and then there's the Ben Hughes going into nursing story, which then turned into the Ben Hughes going into mental health story, which then has led to where we are now. So I guess about me, I grew up in Sydney, born and bred in southern Sydney, Sutherland Shire area. And I guess I had actually no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And you go through high school and everyone's kind of telling you that you need to know. And I found that very stressful. And I'd always had an interest in, I guess, medicine as a whole, that science and the human body, but never the mind. It was never the mind, it was always the physical kind of body. And when it came to doing my HSC, I will absolutely admit I definitely did not prioritize that in any way, shape, or form. Um,
So you specialized in having a good time?
I did absolutely, yes.
That's
Main,
okay. Many people did. And it doesn't
yeah,
mean it's the end of the world, does it?
no, not at all. And that's, I think, I mean, for any young people out there watching this, high school is not the be all or end all. So don't put too much pressure on yourself.
No, I 100% agree.
Yeah. So for me, it kind of came to the choosing in that they give you like a book with all of the jobs in it. It's like pick something. And look, I didn't have the marks for medicine. I wasn't as well, I guess, in a place to be willing to put in that level of study because I wasn't sure. So my goal was to just kind of get into uni and make that decision from there. Um, and a friend of mine was doing nursing, and he's like, "Want to do nursing?" And I was like, "Sure." I very quickly found out during my first placement that, which was aged care, that it was probably the most confronting thing I'd ever experienced. It was on an aged care ward, a psycho Jerry's ward, actually, at Bankstown Hospital. They'd had a scabies outbreak the day we arrived. So they had, I think it was like, they were working skeleton roster, maybe 50 to 60% of their staff were all on leave. And we were thrown in at the deep end. And it was the most confronting thing ever. I absolutely hated it. It was the earliest I'd ever had to wake up in my entire life. And I was exhausted. And at the end of it, I was just like, I can't. Like, and I was convinced that I was going to leave. I was like, well, I'm in uni now. I went to University of Wollongong. Um, and I'd spoken to the dean of nursing now. I was like, I'm transferring out to something different. I don't want to have to touch people. I don't want to have to deal with bodily fluids. Like, it's not my thing. And they were like, well, you can't transfer anywhere for a year. You've got to see the first year out. So I did tough it out. And my second placement was, I guess, equally as bad, but I knew what to expect. So my expectations were quite low, and I didn't hate it. I didn't leave there dreading it every day. So I pushed through. My mate who I was doing it with, I'd made some other friends. So it was all kind of coming together. I then maintained throughout the whole of that first year was like, I can probably do this, but I'm definitely not doing mental health. The idea of mental health scared me. I didn't know anything about it. All I had was this very stigmatized view of what mental health is, how it presents in everyone. And, being young and naive, it's very much that, mental health is scary, mental health is dangerous, mental health is, life threatening, that type of scenario. And I remember doing my very first mental health placement. And after one day, I came home to my now wife. She was like, "How was it?" And I was like, "I'm so angry because I absolutely love it." So it was then, I think it was like maybe my first placement of my second year at uni. I was like, okay, mental health. Annoyingly, it's what I want to do.
So I'm
And
interested, that so originally you hated it and you didn't want to do it. So it was purely based on that whole stigma around mental health that, people were deranged and, mental health, like they're all nutcases. And do you think it was all fear-based?
100%.
Mm,
It was fear of what I'd seen on the like pop culture. So things like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest
yeah.
and Donnie Darko and all of these kind of movies that are based around mental health that don't do a good job of explaining
Mm,
mental health.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, so uh, it was that, plus then my own fear and I guess the misinformation about what mental health is.
Mm,
And it was a time where there was not this level of promotion, I guess, about mental
mm,
health. Um, Across that, I mean, social media wasn't really a big
yeah.
thing either. So there wasn't these
Yeah.
platforms for people to stand on and kind of say,
Mm,
hey, I'm a very normal person as far as everyone's concerned, but I have depression or I've got
yeah.
bipolar. So
Mm,
all you had was these like really kind of Hollywood-esque
mm,
dramatized versions of what
yeah.
mental health is. Like
So this is like, what year are we talking about? Around
this would
about.
have been 2008 or
Mm.
nine.
So like
Yeah,
the early 2000s
early
then.
2000s.
How much do you
And
think that's changed? Sorry to go on a sidetrack, because
no,
I think this is really important, because I think that there really is that. I think that Hollywood and I think a lot of these TV shows and a lot of these movies have caused and have contributed to a lot of the stigma that is around mental health.
yeah,
Do you think that's changed much since then? And
I
what's
think
changed? How much has changed and what's changed?
two sides of the coin. I definitely 110% think that it's changed. I also am surrounded by it every single day. So to
Mm,
actually kind of see the extent of that change is very difficult
mm,
for me at the moment, I guess, to take a step back and look at it objectively because I'm at a point now in my life where all of my friends or the people I spend the most time with are in the mental health
mm,
industry or in the
yeah.
health industry. So it's spoken about. My friends, my friendship circle outside of work is also very open with talking about mental health, and
Mm,
there's not that level of stigma there. Um, as far as in the media and what I see on social media, it definitely seems to be destigmatized significantly. Um, I think personally, a lot of what you see on particularly TikTok around certain diagnoses and mental health, Gen Z have done an excellent job at
mm,
destigmatizing and kind of talking about mental health, which I think is excellent and it's great and it's needed
yeah.
and well done, Gen Z. However, I do think at times it maybe goes too far to where it almost trivializes mental health
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
doesn't acknowledge the significant lifelong impacts for that
Mm.
person and the
Mm.
people in that person's life.
Yeah.
Um, I think things like TV shows like Euphoria,
Mm.
um, as looking at it, if you want to watch that show as a person and enjoy the Hollywood aspect of
Yeah.
it, sure, great TV show. I
Mm.
do think in ways it almost glorifies drug use. It makes it
Mm.
look glamorous to a
Mm.
point. I mean, there's certainly scenes where you're like, that's wild.
Yeah.
But
I feel really old now because I have no idea what you're talking
it's
about. It's
got
all
then,
right. I know. Now I'm going to go and try and find this TV show.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and but I think it starts a conversation. And I think
Yeah.
that's what is really good. And that's what's happening now is that regardless of what's starting that conversation, the conversation has been had.
Yeah. That's true.
And that's what it needs. It needs
Mm.
that
Mm.
momentum of having a conversation about mental
Yeah.
health, having
Yeah.
even Gen Zers out there that are like laughing about their depression. It's like, okay, that's great. That started the conversation. And I guess the mental health practitioner in me is like, but are you supported? Who's looking after you?
Yeah.
Are you safe? Like,
Yeah.
and it would be great if everyone was able to kind of do that and
Yeah. Yeah.
show that same level of support.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's interesting, particularly with things like, and I don't know, like depending on whether it seems obvious to me because I've children that have ADHD, but there's a lot of like ADHD in that seems to be in the media now, and it's like everybody's got ADHD or everyone has a little bit of ADHD, and I think when you talk about that particularly. When we talk about trivializing that. And I, for one, kind of look at it and see the reverse side of that and can see all of the other side of the coin where my kids struggle massively, like have quite serious issues with literacy and emotion dysregulation and all of that kind of stuff that is lifelong and really affects their ability to learn and affects their socialization when they're at school and all of that kind of stuff. And then other people that kind of go talk about it and kind of talk it down and say that it's not that big a deal. And it's there's it seems like there's an interesting kind of dynamic when a lot of people talk about that stuff out there.
yeah, I think ADHD is a great example of over the years, I guess, and this is where social media, I guess, has really kind of come into it, is that people are able to show. Growing up for me, ADHD was always the wild kid that was like running around the classroom and
Yeah,
just, a whirlwind,
yeah,
uncontrollable.
yeah.
And
Little Johnny in the back corner. And
yeah,
there was like one or two kids at school, and that was it.
yeah. And with I guess over the years, diagnostic tools have improved. They're I guess they've afforded psychiatrists are not gatekeeping a lot of these diagnostic tools anymore, and now psychologists can diagnose, social workers can diagnose, nurse practitioners can diagnose, and
Mm,
they've been afforded the education and the training to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms. And social media has really highlighted, which I think is a great thing, that
mm.
ADHD firstly presents very different in women than it does men.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And it's not always that kid running around being
Mm,
wild in the back of the classroom. And I think that it's almost incorrectly named. It's not an attention deficit. It's almost the opposite, where it's a
yeah.
hyper focus, an attention hyper
Yeah.
focus. and that level of disorganization that we see
Mm.
in a lot of kids and adults is that they're able to focus. You get a child with ADHD and get them doing something that they enjoy or that they're good at,
Yeah.
you won't be
Yeah.
able to pull them away, and they will do it
Yeah.
perfectly.
Yeah.
And what you get is going into schools, and unfortunately, the Australian schooling system and curriculum does not accommodate for
Mm.
neurodivergence by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
Like, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
exactly right.
you have to do all of these things. So
Yeah.
a child might excel at science, but then it comes to English and they like read Shakespeare, and that child's like, absolutely not.
Yeah. Yes.
And
100%.
no amount of medication is going to be able to get that
Mm.
child to, maybe they'll be able to read Shakespeare or sit in the classroom quiet enough and not disturb everyone else around them, but they
Mm.
will still really struggle to absorb that
Mm.
information, to be able to regurgitate that in a way, that the very specific way
Mm.
that the Department of Education wants them to in their
Yeah.
English exams. And so I guess social media has been excellent in highlighting that there's inattentive
Mm.
type ADHD. So
Yeah.
those types of people that can, and you see it a lot in adults, and this is probably one of the, I guess, the strains of
Yeah.
ADHD.
Straight.
Lots of adults
Yeah.
now would resonate with, is that
Mm.
they can sit there and procrastinate and do absolutely nothing until it's like, okay, this thing's due in an hour, need to get it done. And they get that dopamine hit and then hyper focus and smash it out, get it done,
Yeah.
and it's okay. And one of the, I guess, the things about those people is that they will fly under the radar. And this is where that improved
Mm.
diagnostic criteria has
Yeah.
come, that those kids at school will sit there quietly, procrastinate, doing whatever it is that they,
Mm.
but be able to produce work and submit work that is good. It's
Yeah.
passing. They're passing. They're not failing. They may not be excelling,
Mm.
but they're not drawing attention to themselves where a teacher's saying, I think something's going on here.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get them some help. So, and now I do think that is changing, that people are now able
Mm.
to recognize, even if they're not
Yeah.
trained, because of the things that they're seeing on social media. So I think as far
Yeah.
as stigmatization goes, the use of social
Mm.
media platform, but for things like that, it's been really good.
Yeah.
Depression, depression
Yeah.
doesn't always present itself as someone who locks themselves in their room and cries.
Yeah, definitely.
Depressed people turn up, depressed people smile, depressed people laugh.
Mm.
Depressed people are really, really good at masking how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And they will put on that brave face and turn up to that event that they have to go to, and then go home and fall apart because the
Yeah.
amount of energy that they've had to use to be able to do that is just exhausting. And
Mm.
I think it's really important to acknowledge that and recognize that. And that's
Yeah.
where I guess that is the intent potentially behind Are You Okay Day?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which,
It's funny, I used to loathe that day for so long. Like I used to absolutely loathe that day because I just thought it was just the token day. I just say, oh, are we ready for token day?
yeah,
But it's I've actually massively changed my opinion on that day because like I've looked into Are You Okay Day, and the council actually do quite a lot of research and they're very active
yeah,
into supporting like suicide and stuff like that, and they do a lot of work not only on that day but on other days of the year and everything, and really do a lot of promotion to try and reduce the numbers of people that suicide. And to that I just think that's plaudable. Like I
yeah.
think that's great. you know.
Yeah.
So
Well,
anyone that's going to do that, I always think that's great. So I don't
yeah.
call it token day anymore.
I can appreciate the intent behind it, and I get what they're trying to do. And from an organizational perspective, I think it's great, and I know that they do great things. From an individual level, I love that people are asking, or there's a day where people, I guess it's a day where we've destigmatized mental health enough where people feel it's okay to ask other people if they're okay, which I think is great. And my issue with it is I don't want people to only do that on one day.
Yes. Yeah.
364 other days of the year where people may not
Totally
necessarily be
agree.
okay.
Yeah.
I also wish that people would, if they're going to ask, be able to know what to do if someone says they're not.
Yes. And it was interesting actually because they do like, because on LinkedIn, I actually follow them when I started to see some great information being produced by them around, you know, other statistics and trying to decrease the rates of suicide and stuff. They were actually producing information around what are you going to do if someone says that they're not okay? What do you say? Here's some information and all this kind of stuff. So I actually grabbed that, and that was something that I was actually kind of distributing through my channels around that day as well, because I totally agree with you. I think that,
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay for you and me, but what about people out there who don't actually understand or know what to say when people say that they're not okay, you know? I think that's really important. You know, I think the other thing that I did say that if they think that someone's not okay is to get someone who knows how to have that conversation with them. Like that's something that I always say, because I think that's important. You know, if you don't know how to have this conversation, then get someone who does know how to have the conversation to have it with them.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So
Actually, I'll interrupt now because I think this is really cool. I'm actually I've decided, and I never do these kind of things. I've decided that I'm going to have a big blue table at uni in October, which is really cool. So Big Blue Table is run by Beyond Blue, and basically what it is that you host a Big Blue Table. So it's a big meal. So it's going to be like a big lunch that I'm organizing to try and get the academics to bring food in for all the students. And basically what it is, it's to talk about bringing out like food to try and kind of promote like mental health awareness. So I'm throwing it to say that, you know, I'm admitting that I'm someone who has experienced poor mental health in the past. And one thing that's helped me is talking about it. So I want you guys to know that if anyone is not feeling, you know, 100% and that they want to get help, that, you know, it will get better, and I can highly recommend you to talk about it. So that's what I'm going to do in October. Yeah. So that's what I've decided to do. So I know I'm announcing it here.
You heard it here first. Yeah,
Yay.
that's really cool. And
I just think it's a great thing, you know.
Yeah. And
because it is important, if you aren't feeling okay, that you do talk about it. And honestly, as I can bear witness, that if you do talk about it, it does get better. I promise you it does.
Yeah. I
On that note, whether we can curl back into your conversation. I know we've diverted like so far off track, it's not funny.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, on that note, and I guess this is where my, I guess, experience in mental health has kind of led me, is that mental health does not discriminate. So one of my biggest takeaways from I guess, like a socioeconomic perspective, mental health does not discriminate. I have homeless people who have been living rough for years, and I've assessed CEOs of huge multi-billion dollar companies. It does not matter.
Mm.
Mental health does not discriminate.
Yeah.
So with while I was at uni, I had the opportunity, which at the time felt like a huge burdensome problem of just like, why am I so distractible? Why did I not sort this out earlier? Why do I leave everything to the last minute? Was one of my placements we were supposed to put in. It was my last placement of the year. My now wife was pregnant with my now 12, 13-year-old son. And I had to put in for placements. I didn't do it. It slipped my mind. They were like, the only placement left in the whole of New South Wales is an 8-week placement in Cooma Community Mental Health. So I was living in Sydney. Cooma conveniently is 40 minutes from where I am now. But so I had to,
But you obviously weren't living where you are now.
no, I was living in Sydney.
Yes.
Um, had a very pregnant wife and needed to do this placement in order to finish university. So
Mm.
it's like, excellent. So I had to come very begrudgingly, I did everything I possibly could to try and get out of it, but there was no way to do that. So I had to come down to the Snowy Mountains to do this community mental health placement. And that placement and the team that I worked with there was the, as my son would say, he talks about canon moments, I think he calls them, of like moments that set you on a course. And doing that community placement was like, this is what I want to do, like community mental health. I don't want to be in a hospital. I want to be out helping people in the community, in their homes, where it's safe to do so. And that was an incredible experience. It was an eye-opening experience because if you, well, as paramedics, you will all go and work in the community, and what you will realize
Yes.
is that there's metropolitan community and then there is rural Cooma community where their nearest major hospital is a 4-hour drive away. The area that they cover in terms of servicing people, I mean, they could do a home visit and drive for 4 hours, 3.5 hours to get to the home. It's massive. So resources are limited. They work really hard to keep everyone in the community, and it was an amazing experience. And yeah, so once I'd done that, I was like, well, this is what I want to do. How do I go about doing this? Like, it's a very niche, well, I mean, I guess it is, it's a very niche specialty of like community mental health,
Mm.
which again, I guess, and that's why I love what you're doing, is promoting mental health in the university, because
Mm.
when I was at uni, it was like, here's your 2 mental health subjects. That's all. We're going to go through MSEs and do an assignment on a mental illness type of thing. There was no like, these are the specialties you can go into. So I was very lucky that I was able to get a job at what was then the Southwestern Sydney Area Health Service. They'd introduced for the first time in mental health a transition to mental health program. So for my last 2 years of uni, I was able to go and work at the hospital as an AIN, so an assistant in nursing. First time they'd introduced assistant in nursing to the mental health space, and they provided a whole heap of education, which was amazing. Um, and then you realize that mental health is an umbrella term when it comes to specialties in nursing or psychiatry. You've got, child and adolescent, aged care, acute, subacute, long stay, short stay, PEC, community. And then community is broken down as well into things like they've got case management teams, they've got child and adolescent teams. They've got first episode psychosis team. It's just they've got acute care teams, which is what I went into. And so I was able to get all of that experience and see, which I mean, I'm very thankful for, because lots of nurses don't have that opportunity to be able to experience what it's like to properly work in a hospital or work in a specialty before graduating. You get those snippet kind of placements, but they're always, you're working with nurses, you've got to shadow a nurse, you don't really get to see and or do a lot. But this was all very hands-on, and I got paid to do it, so it was amazing.
Yeah.
uh,
Oh
and
God, if
yeah,
you could do something like that now, I don't
I
know.
know. So I then graduated and went into exactly that. I went into community mental health. I got a job uh, with the crisis team. It was the Marrickville crisis team in the inner west of Sydney. Um, and I learned from some of the best clinicians that I have ever worked with, who it was at a time where I don't know how to say this without sounding like it's dodgy, but
Just say it anyway.
it was a time where there was a lot of autonomy for nurses in the community.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
Psychiatry cover was almost non-existent. We worked with one psychiatrist who worked 3 days a week. Um, and there was, as far as nursing goes and being able to use your nursing skills, I dare say that there were times where I witnessed people working outside of their scope as a nurse. But what I learned in that time was phenomenal.
Mm.
And I wouldn't change it. Um, it was a huge, huge learning curve. So going from the inpatient hospital setting to out in the community, to being on call overnight, to working with
So
police.
in what way was it a huge learning curve?
So the way that the community teams are set up, and they're set up very differently in each area, but where I was working, they're set up where you had two people on a shift, two nurses. So it was
Mm.
myself and one other person. We had a list of about 100 patients that we needed to see. We carried a pager, which they still carry in 2023, which is
I know.
wild.
How funny is that?
And the police and the ambulance working, the ambos working in the area had our pager number,
Mm.
and they would call us and say, we've been called to this person's place. This is their name. This is their address. We think they're suffering from a mental health condition. Sometimes we knew them. We had lots of kind of regular people that we knew who were on our books, who we were supervising medication for and kind of treating.
Mm.
But then on the other hand, there was that acute. Police would call, we would go, we would be walking into a situation that we had no idea about, and it was just us. There was a
Mm.
psychiatrist on call who may or may not answer the phone if you needed help. And we were 24/7, 24 hours a day.
Mm.
We would go home. So I would go home with a pager and lay there and try and sleep and hope to God that it didn't go off.
Yeah.
And then,
So did you tend to, I suppose, try and kind of medicate and calm the patient as much as possible and avoid sending them to hospital?
absolutely. So our
Yeah.
goal is to keep people in the community. Our
Mm.
colleagues would always say, our goal, if people weren't in the community, we'd be out of a job. If we took everyone
Yeah.
to hospital, there'd be nothing for us to do. Uh,
Yeah.
so we would do that, but overnight it would be generally overnight the police calling for people that they had in
Yeah.
custody who
All
were
the time.
kicking off. So that would be every night we were on call. I'd be called to
Yeah.
Newtown police cells, 3
Mm.
a.m., middle of winter, um, freezing my ass off. And I mean, my colleagues that I worked with at the time, then we still talk about it and still, I guess it's you have these really sobering moments. There's these,
Yeah,
I have these memories of like just these periods where I'd kind of, I vividly remember one night being in a rooming house. So essentially a very large terrace house that a slum landlord has partitioned off into multiple rooms. And
yeah,
there's a mattress on the floor in each room. And they just rent it out for 50% of someone's pension, really, or disability pension for
mm,
them to stay there. And I remember being it would have been like 2:30 in the morning. My colleague and I had worked right through. We'd been kind of going
mm,
all day, all night. We got called by the police to go to this person's house. They just left. So this guy was there. The police were like, "We're so sorry. We've got a whole heap of other jobs that we need to do. We think they're all right, but we need you to go." So we get to this guy's place. He lived in this, like, it was literally like 2 by 2 meters, if that, the
yeah,
room, mattress on the floor. It was the middle of winter. It was teeming with rain. And
yeah,
he sitting in there, he had one of those like bar heaters, the orange lights,
yeah,
pumping so much heat out. He was sitting in there, chain smoking, no windows open. And my colleague and I were sitting there, damp because of the rain. We had that dank cigarette smoke all over us.
yeah, yeah.
And this guy was just telling us the most outrageously delusional psychotic story. He'd been using heaps and heaps of drugs. And I just remember sitting there and almost having this like out of body experience of
It's
like looking
like, yeah,
looking down on my colleague and I and this guy, just thinking, what on earth is going on? Like, you could not make this up. Like, it was just wild. And it's the kind of thing that and I guess this is where that the experience and the progression of my career. So it was around maybe a year before this, I'd started doing a master's in mental health nursing through
mm,
University of Newcastle. And it was online. It was very convenient. I was able to do it and just kind of consolidating a lot of what I was learning
mm,
in practice to
yeah,
them, and consolidating that in a master's. And that was good. Um, but you slowly start to realize that a lot of what you're seeing is it's awful. And now looking back on that, like
mm,
I laugh about it, but laugh about it from my perspective of like, what on
yeah,
earth was I doing? Because
mm, mm,
now with 13 or like 15 years of clinical experience, including the 2 years
mm,
while I was at university, consolidating all of that and looking back on that and recognizing how dangerous that situation was.
mm,
Like, me looking back on it, I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, there is no way I would
mm.
let that happen now. Um, but then also recognizing that like that poor guy was clearly so distressed and
Yeah,
so unwell, and we
yeah,
did end up taking him to hospital, and it was all
yeah,
fine. I guess just having those things of like,
yeah. It's interesting though that you say that because I mean I've had a lot of like not like similar experience with stuff like that, but you know when you say that you're in that space and you're looking at the patient and you're looking at yourself and then you have that almost out of body experience,
yeah,
that's like a form of disassociation and that's a trauma response.
yeah, that's the thing. I look back and I,
So it's actually your body experiencing trauma at the time. So you
yeah,
kind of like, and I know because I've had several of those myself, and it wasn't until kind of I got to that space, you know, where I talk about with PTSD and stuff like that, that that I look back at that and myself and the experiences that I had,
yeah,
and I just, but you don't realize it at the time.
no, and that's, I think, it was interesting, and I don't want to come across as been jaded or disillusioned.
Mm,
I mean, I guess I am slightly disillusioned by public mental health. Um,
yeah, yeah.
and I
In a
have,
way that I feel, in a way, and I think that you agree with me, that I feel that we can look after people a lot better than what we do.
yes.
Yeah.
And those people extend to staff. And
Mm,
the one thing that now that I've left public health, um, and I guess like for everyone watching this, I didn't actually at the
yeah.
start say who I was. So I'm Ben. I'm now a nurse practitioner, and I am currently the co-founder of a privately run bulk billed mental health service delivered via telehealth called the Waiting Room Mental Health Services. Um, so that's what I'm doing now. So I'm not in the public health space anymore.
It's all
Um,
right. I'll write it in the blog underneath so everybody will know anyway.
yeah. And I had a lot of these experiences. And at the time, you kind of laugh off a lot of what happened. You know, I was locked in someone's house and he was there barricading the door with a golf club and he was floridly psychotic. And my colleague I was working with was pregnant at the time. And these things happen and we make it out of these situations by the skin of our teeth and like at the time laugh about it. Like I remember laughing about it, just being like, that was outrageous, blah, blah, blah. And it's not until I would tell people, I'd ask how
Mm,
work was, and I'd kind of mention these, like vaguely, these stories about work. And they'd be like, are you out of your mind? And
mm.
like, I don't want to liken it to being a battered wife, but you kind of get Stockholm syndrome. Like
Yeah.
when you're surrounded by it, you kind of normalize a lot of what happens.
Mm,
And
mm.
it's not until you talk to other people and they're like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
um, and
Yeah.
again, like with gaining more experience clinically, educating myself more, I've done, I went and did a clinical certificate or a graduate diploma or a graduate certificate in like emergency clinical nursing, just to kind of see what that was. I've gone and done occupational health and safety
Mm,
as a master's to just kind of further my education. And when you learn about all of this other stuff, and now with the benefit of hindsight, kind of looking back, it's like there's very little support for health workers.
mm,
Um, you kind of tell your manager that, oh, I was locked in someone's house, had a golf club threatening to kill me, and they're like, oh, here's a card,
mm,
maybe call EAP. Um,
mm.
and so my career progressed from there. From Marrickville, we then merged with RPA, Camperdown Mental Health.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to use actual names, but anyway,
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't work for them anymore.
No, no, because you're not, we don't like, I don't, I don't associate with anything. This is just my independent thing anyway. So
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
say anything.
Brilliant. And that was great because we merged with another team, and which I'm sure you can imagine, two teams working in very similar areas, merging together. No one knew each other outside of what we'd heard, Chinese whispers. I'm sure yourself and everyone watching this will realize that when they go into health, whether it's medicine, nursing, paramedicine,
Yes.
it's a very small world and everyone loves to
Yeah.
gossip.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, totally.
So everyone comes into this merger with these weird preconceived ideas about other people. The health
Mm.
service, I would say rightfully or wrongfully, but it was definitely wrongfully, decided to merge on a public holiday. So no executive was available. No one had swipe access to the building. It was an absolute shit show. Um, but that merge meant that we were able to essentially rewrite the model of care. Um, and we rewrote it, I guess, metaphorically, in that we came up with our own way of working to and implemented that until executive were like, I guess we should probably formalize this now. It was good and it was bad. It had its pros, it's had its cons, like all models of care. But at the time, I really felt like we were doing a really good job. And as they say, change is as good as a holiday. So I think
Hmm.
that change probably it felt like it was for the better at the time. It allowed us to kind of like have a new lease on things, and I guess I was disillusioned into thinking that we were continuing to provide a really good service and we're doing all of this great stuff
Mm.
because it was change. It was something different. There were different people. The area was twice as big. I was going to new places, and it was really cool and fun. And then I got really just kind of shitty about it. I think, and it coincided with becoming, I guess, more of a senior clinician on the team,
Mm.
having a lot of juniors, and was kind of teaching them. And I guess what was great, and it was like Gen Z, except they're not Gen Z, they're all older than that. But coming in with this new lease on mental health, being like, it's okay to talk about mental health. We're coming in, these young people were coming in with, they were very green. They'd come out of university. They were all doe-eyed. They were like, yes, this is amazing. We're going to create great change. And they learned different things at uni. So they'd say things like, why are we doing it that way? Why does this happen like that?
Oh,
And
ouch.
at the time, yeah, I was like, how dare you question this amazing? And it was just kind of eating away at me. And then it got to the point where I was like, tail between my legs, they're right. Like, why were we doing things a certain way? It didn't feel
Mm.
right. And then that, I guess, my level of angst then coincided with a proposition from the director of nursing asking me to go and manage the mental health access line and admission office for Sydney Local Health District, which I did. And it was, again, another change. So that change coincided with me feeling a bit iffy. And then it was a different workplace. I worked with different people. It was a different role. I was doing more or all managing. It was very much less clinical. And it was there that I met my now business partner.
Mm.
And
So do you think moving into that kind of like that phone access line was the thing that kind of gave you the idea of what you're doing now?
it was definitely part of it. So there was
Mm.
definitely the aspect, and I was that person. So then I very quickly realized that I was that young person coming into a team that had all of these very much like concrete and existing workflows. And I came in and was
Mm.
just like, what the hell are we doing here? Like, this is insane. Like, there is easier ways to do all of this.
Mm.
um, I guess the difference was, and I guess I came in and at a management level where I was like, we're not, didn't just question it, I changed it. I was like, we're
Yeah.
doing it this way. So it was at that point that I realized that telehealth was a thing, that it was
Yeah.
possible, and that it could be far more than what anyone was
Mm.
actually using it for.
Well, that's really well, that kind of coincided. Was that around or that before COVID?
Before COVID. So this was
What
2018.
okay, well, it's not that much before
Is that
COVID.
kind of thing?
So it was only a couple of
2020,
years. Well, it was a couple of years before
yeah,
COVID. So
2017, 2018.
it was probably good because it was probably gave you time to kind of find your feet in that telehealth role, and then COVID hit.
Yeah, well, frustrating story. So my now business partner was there. She's the CNC working there. So we worked very closely together. And she was like, I think I'm going to go and do my nurse practitioner masters. Are you interested? And I was like, I I have a compulsion. I can't really not do things. I need to constantly be stimulated. I
Yeah.
It's probably like me watching TikTok videos now, diagnosing myself with ADHD, as we've discussed before. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't. I like putting I work well under pressure. I generally am doing 400 things at once, and I wasn't doing anything at that time. So I was like, sure, why not? Applied to uni. We both got in and started doing the nurse practitioner masters.
Mm.
Um, the director of nursing, actually, sorry, I'll take a step back. What then prompted me to do it was that the director of nursing, who asked me to do the management job, kind of came and said, look, there's these nurse practitioner roles that we're going to introduce into the community. Being like community mental health being my specialty, he was like, here's the EOI. What do you think? And
Hang on.
I,
Ready and go.
yeah, so I got this expression of interest and was like, community mental health, nurse practitioner. I was like, is this the universe telling me that it's something I should do? Because I'd already, like, the seed had already been planted about doing the nurse practitioner masters. And then this happened. So I was like, all right. So my colleague and I, my business partner, and I were like, we'll apply for the role, we'll interview for the role. If I get the role, then I'll submit my university application because I wasn't fully committed to doing uni if it wasn't going to amount to anything at the end. So we serendipitously both got the role as a job share position. So
Oh, wow.
his partner and I both worked point 0.5, covering each other's point 0.5. So did the masters, and it was excellent. And again, so this change happened. I then went back from management into a clinical role, but the most senior clinical role you can have as a nurse.
Mm.
Um, and it came with its own challenges.
Ready.
Yeah. So we started this role with no model of care, with no clear understanding of what we were going to do. There was a team of 5 of us at the time. We were four of us at the time. We were the first community facing nurse practitioners in public health in the country. So there was no clear guidelines. There was no precedent set. Everyone just kept referring to us as trailblazers. And it's like, that's great, but we need some level of guidance, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and we were not well received at all by
Mm.
psychiatry, by the emergency department, by the inpatient units, or by the community team. We were just this kind of what could have been this like really great service
Mm.
became this siloed team that no one really wanted anything from because they
Mm.
all thought that what they were doing was working.
Yeah,
Uh,
which is so stupid because everybody is so overworked. Like
exactly.
unless you're a shit psychologist or a psychiatrist, there's waiting lists, up to,
Yeah.
ridiculous weeks and months everywhere. Emergency departments are full. Like, don't even get me started. Emergency departments are absolutely not where people who are suffering need to
Yeah.
be. Like, hospital wards are full. We want to keep people in the community anyway,
Yeah. That's
like
it.
it's ridiculous. And the fact that you're were so poorly received is just disgusting. Like,
Yeah.
that's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. It got to the point
And
where,
disappointing, like really disappointing.
and I think that's it. It was just this like, again, this change had happened for me at a time where I was feeling uncertain and I was feeling a bit, kind of unsettled. This change happened and it came at this great time. And I was like, yes, like a new lease on life.
Mm,
I've been told I'm going to be a trailblazer. This is amazing. And
mm,
everyone goes into the healthcare industry because there's a level of altruism where you're like, I can
yeah,
provide, I can create a difference. And I really thought that we could create a difference, but then there were just these barriers after barriers after barriers,
yeah,
and it just was really disheartening.
yeah,
And then there was a very tragic incident that happened on my team where a colleague was killed on the job.
oh,
Um,
that's not good.
no, and I was just like, what am I doing? Like, this
Mm,
is unsafe. I was like, I don't know how many times people have to tell me that it's unsafe. I don't know how many times I have to have these feelings of like unsettledness that also just happen to coincide with change for me to be like, maybe that unsettledness is because I'm feeling unsafe. I'm having these trauma responses.
mm,
I'm burnt out. And
mm,
I pushed through.
yeah,
And with the benefit of hindsight now, it was the wrong thing. Everything's worked out great now. But with the
yeah,
benefit of hindsight, something I should have done something sooner for myself.
mm, mm,
Um, I pushed through. I made a lot of noise in the service about the safety of crisis teams,
yeah,
and a lot of it was kind of fell on deaf ears, it felt like. So I just kind of had this thought of like, I'm going to finish uni and that's it, I'm done. On top of all of that, I just didn't feel like I was providing this clinical care that was needed to the people that needed it.
mm,
There was so much more that I thought we could have done, that crisis teams and community teams could do, that we just were not doing, that we were not allowed to do,
yeah,
uh, because it wasn't, that's not our role, it's someone else's role. And it's like, yeah, but who is
yeah,
that someone else? Because that someone
yeah,
else isn't there.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
I'd
And
see this,
reaching the people that need the help.
yeah.
Like I can think of people offhand that need
Mm,
help that, just can't get it.
yeah. I'd see the
But
same
would,
person every week.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Every single week, the same people would present on the
Mm,
crisis team, the same people would get referred, and we'd contact them and they'd be like, I'm feeling okay now. And they'd just
mm,
so quickly get discharged back to their GP, and their GP would be like, I'm so, yeah, I'll maybe bring up their mental health if they book another appointment. Or the
mm,
GP like, no, I don't feel comfortable managing their mental health. I don't know anything about it, and refer them to a
yeah,
psychiatrist. That psychiatrist has got a 6 to 9 month wait list, and it's going to
yeah,
cost them
exactly.
$800 a session.
Yeah,
And my business partner and I were like, there's got to be more than this. Like,
yeah. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
as a nurse practitioner in public health, there's a glass ceiling, and
Mm,
you hit that glass ceiling and you hit it very quickly.
yeah,
And you see everything that you could be doing, and you could see all the change that you could make. But you're looking at that through the glass ceiling that's covered in red tape. And
yeah,
pub, public health is still very much a medical model. They're still
yes,
very much
yeah,
into creating siloed services to
yeah,
fill gaps. Um, I once I likened it to someone asking to have their house renovated, but not giving the contractor the plans to the original house, and just getting them to try and build something that fits. And that's what the whole public health service seems to constantly do, is just create these
mm,
siloed teams that aren't attached to anyone, that and not necessarily, there's no clinical governance. It's all very unclear. And
Mm.
it just didn't sit right with me. It didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like I was doing a good thing.
Mm.
And on top of all of that, I had all of this really tragic thing, this tragic stuff happen at work that was just
Yeah.
not, I didn't feel that it was addressed appropriately by the service. I didn't feel that staff were supported well enough. I didn't feel comfortable in any of it. And it festered. And it got to the point where I'd kind of finished. So I was coming towards the end of finishing uni. My eldest son at the time was boarding at Snowy Mountains Grammar down in Jindabyne. And my wife and I were like, let's move there. Let's go
Mm.
to Jindabyne. We'll take a year for his HSC. So he's doing his
Yeah.
HSC at the moment. And we'll come down here, support him. So he doesn't have to be in boarding. We can all spend time as a family.
Yeah.
And it, I was like, done, we can make it happen.
Mm.
So I finished uni. I was like, I've got enough long service leave, I've got enough annual leave that I can take the year off. I don't even have to work if I don't want to. And I can spend that
Mm.
time working out where I, as a nurse practitioner with 13 years community experience in acute mental health in this really niche specific sector, who is also a nurse practitioner,
Mm.
can fit. And it's, as far as burnout goes, it probably came a year too late because
Mm.
I think any chance of me going back to public health is probably non-existent, which I
Yeah.
think is sad for public health
Yeah.
because, not putting tickets on myself, but there are a lot of other great clinicians who I worked with, exceptionally great clinicians who have also left, who have got no intention of going
Mm.
back because
Yeah.
of the way that it was working. And it was very disheartening for the people that do access public health services
Mm.
that would benefit so greatly from these
Yeah.
exceptional clinicians.
Yeah.
And I had realized, as far as my burnout goes and as far as where I was at with my own mental health, I'd spent
Mm.
15 years of my life caring for other people's mental health. And at no point in that period of time did I even introspectively look at my own mental health. And there were certainly warning signs in terms of burnout.
Yeah.
Um, you know, drinking more, making dumb decisions, and falling out with friends over dumb stuff that
Yeah.
had we just communicated, that maybe things would have been different. Who knows?
Yeah.
And I still did not attribute any of it to burnout or to trauma or
Mm.
vicarious trauma until Valentine's Day this year. I was in Japan. I was out for dinner with my wife. I had received a text message from an old colleague. Another incident had taken place. It was a near miss incident. And they'd kind of said that this had happened. And I burst into tears. And it all came back, I think, because I'd been removed from it by that point for like 6 weeks. It wasn't even that long. I'd
Yeah.
been out for
Yeah.
6 weeks. I'd been removed from it. I hadn't even thought of it. And because I had 12 months of leave planned,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I guess I wasn't thinking about work.
Yeah.
And that happened. And I was like, I cannot go back. Like, that
Mm.
is just, like, it was trauma response.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, since then, I've done a lot of work on my mental health and,
Mm. Yeah.
just exercising more,
Yeah.
boundaries with work. and
Mm.
the work that I'm doing
Mm.
now, and actually putting my time and energy into providing a good service. So my business partner and I have set up the waiting room, so TWR mental health, and we were like, let's be those people that crisis teams or GPs can lean on when
Yes.
they don't know what to do, when the public health system's telling these crisis teams that they can't discharge anyone to no one. Like,
Yes.
discharge them to us. We've got the experience. We will not charge that person.
Yes.
We're bulk billing them. We can
Beautiful.
provide that ongoing support.
Mm.
And it was picked up by a few GPs across. We contacted hundreds of GP practices
Yeah.
and heard back from like two, uh, which was disheartening, but we persevered. And then my business partner was like, what about Headspace? Young people. The Headspace at the time were kind of, there was the I don't know if it was an inquest. They were looking into Headspace
Mm.
um, because of their wait times. And we were like,
Mm.
the waiting room, it's in the name. So we contacted a few Headspaces, like, we will look after your wait list. You send us the names of the kids that are waiting for services from you, and we will support them, and we'll give you a handover in a neat little package once you're following up with them.
Mm.
And since then, so since this was in March, April, so since April, we've signed on with partnerships with, I think we're at 19 headspaces across the state. We have service level agreements with, I think, four of them at the moment. So we attend their meetings, we go to their area meetings, their management meetings, and we are providing the service
I got a
that
little light. Getting
the
a bit dark in
service,
here.
yeah. We've been providing the service that we've wanted.
Mm.
We're getting this feedback where
Mm.
young people are contacting us because they're wanting to talk about their mental health, and
Awesome.
it's been really encouraging to see that. And we are continuing to grow. We've got psychiatrist practices that are coming on board for us to help with repeat scripts, so that the psychiatrist can continue to see more people to reduce their
Yeah.
wait lists.
Yeah,
And
just for repeat scripts and stuff like that,
yeah, you know, the
that's basic
10,
follow-up is, that's fine.
yeah. So
Easy, isn't it?
yeah, and it's I've officially resigned from public health. I'm
Oh,
thriving. My mental health is
yes.
thriving.
Very
Um,
good. So
it's
good to see.
yeah, it's excellent. And I think, as far as, I mean, I mentioned Headspace and GPs, but as far as our service goes, anyone can access our service as long as they've got a Medicare card.
Mm.
Um, Contact us. We're here to
Yes.
help.
So there you
Um,
go.
yeah.
Wonderful.
So that's a
So
very
anyone
long.
out there who feels like I know, but what a great conversation though. That's what I have to say.
Yeah.
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 So many little pockets of like gems of facts and interesting
Yeah.
concepts there. I think so.
Yeah. I think if people watching this can take, or listening to this can take away anything
Mm.
from it, and burnout is huge. Burnout affects everyone. Burnout is affecting you even when you don't think it is.
Mm.
And if if change happens and it feels like a breath of fresh air, take a step back and look at why. Try and look
Yes.
at what is going on. Why is it that that change has made you feel so good?
Mm.
And is that change longitudinally going to be beneficial, or are you going to be in the same position in 1 month, 1 year, two
Yeah.
years time?
Yeah.
Listen to your body. Like,
Mm.
practice what you preach. Paramedics are out telling people to look after themselves. Paramedics
Yes.
manage mental health more than they realize when they go into paramedicine.
Mm.
Mental health is a part of everyone's life,
Yeah.
including your own. So
Yeah.
listen to your body. Listen.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think it's important to look after yourselves. And I think it's something that I wish that I'd spend more time, looking after myself. And I mean, I used to hate mindfulness when I was younger and meditation. And I think even just incorporating yoga, just do it once a week.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
know, you don't have to commit to like thousands of hours. Like even 5 minutes of meditation a day is going to help you um know, like, boundless.
Yeah.
So just a little bit every day is fine.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ben.
No,
It's
thank
been
you. I
a
hope it's,
pleasure. This has
yeah.
been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much for joining us on Spotlight. It's been brilliant today.